Very good. Okay, so today there will be a class, and tomorrow, God willing, Wednesday is a fast day, but there will be a class in the morning. And Thursday, there will not be a class. Thursday, no class Thursday. But God willing, there will be one on Friday morning. Thursday is Purim. Okay, here we go. Let's do the first, and then we'll skip a little bit. Here we go. Chayav enish, a person as an obligation, libasumi, to get drunk, Apuria on Purim, ad lo yadan, until you don't know, bein Or Haman uborach Mordechai, between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. That's what it says in the Talmud Megillah. You're supposed to get so drunk on Purim that you don't know the difference between Haman is a bad guy and Mordechai is a good guy. Okay, how could this possibly be? So we're going to see. Kativ, it is written, Ki yad al case yudke, milchama Amelek midor dor. It says that God raises his hand over his throne. Yad, God raises his hand, al kos, on the throne, yudke, of God. It says milchama Hashem, a war to God against Amelek for all generations. That's what we just finished reading, right, in Parshas Zachor. Vayomer v'omer Razal, the rabbis say, She'ein Hashem Shalem, Ve'ein Akiseh Shalem, that God's throne is not complete, and God's name, is not complete, and God's throne is not complete until the name of Amelek is wiped out. What's going on over here? I mean, how can it be God is not complete? What does that mean? He's not complete, and why is it dependent on destroying Amelek? I mean, God, Amelek is a nation that God is creating. God's creating everything. One of the messages of Judaism and Hasidut, especially Chabad Hasidut, points this out over and over again, and we've stressed over and over again that everything is being created by God all the time. In other words, there is nothing separate from God. That's why all mankind is supposed to worship only the Creator, because there really is nothing except for the Creator. He's creating everything. Everything you look outside, see trees and sky and houses and people and everything like that. This is being created constantly by God. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense to say constantly, because time is also a creation of God. So God is creating everything all the time. So why is it so important that we should wipe out this nation that God is creating? And that if we don't do that, God is not complete. His what does that mean? His name is not complete and his throne is not complete. What does that mean? To understand this, behold, it's written, Reshis Goy Amalek. The first of the nations is Amalek va'achrito, and his end, Ade Ovid, is total destruction. The beginning of the nations is Amalek, and its end is going to be total destruction. Sheyesh bechinat Amalek, bechinat Reshi, there is in this category, this creation of God, which is called Amalek. Let's say for our purposes right now, it's a nation. It's got a beginning and it's got an end. Okay, now the Rebbe is also taking it for granted that you understand already, if you've learned this book, Torah Or, and we've gotten up to as far as we've gotten, and that you understand this very basic principle of Judaism, of life, is that the reason God is creating everything constantly, there's a reason. And the reason he's doing it is so, first of all, we should realize it. And secondly, that we should fix it. The world is created in such a way that God wants us to fix it, fix the world. And there are some things in the world that can be fixed just by being aware of them, right? Like we said, God creates everything. Some things that can be fixed only by correcting them. like the commandments, making blessings, using your time properly, learning Torah, corrects everything, brings a blessing. Some things in the world can only be fixed up by avoiding them. Avoiding them. A Jew is not supposed to eat pork. A Jew is not supposed to work, do light on Shabbat, right? All mankind, in fact, you're not supposed to get angry. You're not supposed to avoiding. And then there's certain things that have to be destroyed, and that's what Amelek is. And Amelek is a creation that if you want to serve God, that you have to destroy it. But the problem is he's also the beginning. What does it mean? He's the beginning of the of the non-Jews. Now it says that if Adam had not eaten from the tree, there would be no death in the world, and there would also be no non-Jews in the world. Everyone in the world would be Jewish. Because what's a Jew? A Jew is a person that feels God and wants to serve God all the time, every moment of the day, the night. So if Adam wouldn't have eaten from the tree, there would be no non-Jews in the world. There wouldn't be such a thing as not serving God. It'd be like there would be no suicide. Everybody would feel that to go against God is like suicide. You're cutting yourself off from the source of life. Well, the beginning of this non-Jewish feeling, that's Amelek. What does it mean, Rishi? Who's Soviv Kolomim? This is an aspect of God which is called surrounding all the worlds, Makar the Kula, it's the source of everything. Amelek comes from a tremendously high source. The potential for suicide, the potential for defying God. Defying God. God made a power in the world that's opposite life. God is pure life. That's opposite good. It's opposite building. God is the creator, the destroyer. He made a power in the world that is opposite Judaism, opposes Judaism, opposes the Torah. That's Ani Rishon. It comes from a tremendously high source, the source of all being. The Ani Acharon, and then what it says, Amelek is also called, he says, I'm the first, I'm the last. Rishis Goyim. The Achrito, this is what's called Mamalik Homer. Amelek is, if you want to call it, a mirror of God. Just like God is the first and the last, he created a feeling in the world, and it's in every human being, every Jew especially, that every person feels, I'm first. Nothing's before me. Just like God feels that, so we feel it. On the heavens and the above and on the earth below, this is the aspect of God. That's called the last aspect. The first aspect of God is above the world. The last aspect is how God is in the world. Kach also, that's how God is. There is in the powers of klipa, the shells, bad, evil, sitrachra, Amelek. Amelek is the beginning of the nations, and his end is total destruction. What does this mean? He's the beginning of what's called the 7 nations, Akanani, Achiti, etc. These are what's called the 7 selfish emotions in everybody. Everybody has it. 7 selfish, destructive emotions. Anger, haughtiness, pleasure, lightheadedness, depression, aggression. Barishisam, in the beginning, the source of all this is Amelek. Amelek is like pure egotism. The end of Amelek, Adi Ovid, must be totally destroyed. This is the end of all the levels of klipa, of evil. But tamtzitam shu inyan, his gabrus koach hara shebakal mida begaluya betokva. This is how the source of all of them, but also in the end, it's the egotism in all of them. Or sometimes a person can get angry because he just loses it, right? Just loses it. Sometimes a person gets angry because he just wants to destroy everything. I think maybe this is the Indian of a rush of a ralo. It's called a person that's bad against God, and he doesn't feel anything wrong with it. Right? It says he's rush, he's bad. Varalo, and inside of him is also bad. Perish ra milashan ra l'shamayim ra l'brios. This is the desire to be bad to heaven, bad to the world, total destruction. This is like roges, angry, levachzeri, cruelty. Shabo mitokef is gabrus ra, that comes from the how do you say, overpowering, the over dominance of bad selfishness. Sheish lo kol adam. This is what's called sheish lo eres kanachash. This is the poison of the snake. That's Amelek. Amelek is the same thing as the snake that caused Adam to sin. That's the Nachash HaKadmoni, the primordial serpent. And this is called the Achrit Shel Amelek. And this is the last thing about total destruction. Not that Amelek will be totally destroyed. That also means that. But it means that what Amelek wants is total destruction of the world. My teacher, one of my teachers, his name was Rabbi Mendel Futafas, as he told me that when he was in Russia, said that there were the Cossacks, the Ukrainians, and that they were bloodthirsty murderers. They would murder people, like there was Khmelnytsky and these people. They were just bloodthirsty murderers, and they especially liked to kill Jews. They murdered. Right, the Ukrainians, they were big helpers with the Nazis, but it was sort of a different motive. The Germans, the Ukrainians, whatever, they murdered people and in the nighttime they could all get drunk and cry. I killed a lady, I killed a baby. They would feel bad about it. Why did they do the killing? Because they were just hot-blooded. They were just, how do you say, vicious animals. Vicious animals. That's called the end level of Amelek. That's the end level of Amelek. That's Amelek being expressed outwardly. There's total destruction outward. But there's even a greater level of Amelek, and that is the Germans. So when the Germans came in, they didn't show any emotions whatsoever. No emotions whatsoever. They could kill 1,000 people, throw them in a big pit, and just clean off their boots and laugh about it and smoke a cigarette. No emotion whatsoever. That's the beginning of Amelek. The beginning of Amelek is pure evil. The end is the fire that comes out in the physical world, in the world. So this is the beginning. This is the source of all bad emotions. Pure egotism. Pure egotism. No regrets, no conscience. This is the source of the Vesivov and the cause of their origin, of selfishness, lust, etc. That's what's called Amal. Amal. Alzeh, it says, Lora Amal b'Yisrael. God said, this is one of the blessings that Bilam gave to the Jewish people. Bilam wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and God transformed his curses into blessings. And this is one of the blessings. There's no Amal in Israel. Amal in this case means the desire to destroy. Ki Amal is the same level as Amalek, is the same as the letters Amal, like evil, Laka. What's Laka? Laka is to hit. Bechinat Amal, who Amastir Elokus. This hides God, Mafrid, and it separates. She'ein Shem Shalem. Also, Malika, we learned this, if you remember, when we learned about the bird offerings in the Holy Temple. Malika is severing the head from the body, severing the head from the body. Malika. Okay, let's explain this. 1 minute. Okay. Ubira Adavar. Let's explain this. Here it says, Chilek Hashem Amo. A part of God is his people. Shebakol Nefesh Yisrael, every single Jew, Yesh Bechinas Havaya. There is this level of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Ki the Vav of God's name, and this already is the emotions. Vav Ketzavos. These are what's called the 6 directions: up, down, right, left, front, back. This corresponds to the 6 emotions of God. Right is kindness, left is good. It's also the 6 directions we shake the lulav with: right, left. And also on a person's soul. This chesed derua yamina, kindness is the right arm. This is Abraham. Love. This Abraham gave to all of his seed after him. She'ekol adam, that every Jew, Yochal, will be able, lo'orer et ahava, to arouse this love, a love to God, and to be drawn after God, and to cling to him. This is called a natural love of God. What's the Rebbe explaining now? He's explaining the name of God, which is found in every Jew, especially the letter Vav, in this case, the letter Vav. Usually Yud, the first 2 letters, that is the intellect, faith in God, understanding God. That's Yud, and the letter Hey. Vav is the emotions of God. In every Jew. When it says that people are made in the image of God, this is another one of the meanings, what it means. That the Jewish people are made in an image of God, that just as God has intellect, that's his Torah, and his emotions, how he creates the world, is also the Jewish people are created in that image. The Jewish people are supposed to wake this up in all mankind. That sentence that says that man is created in God's image, that was said by Noah, that was said by God to Noah after the flood. So I'll really repeat. Okay, so then there's also love is the first of these 6 emotions. That's the Vav in God's name. Vav is the gematria 6. To have love for God alone. That's one of the 6 emotions. Another one is Gevura. That's the left arm of God. This is what's called Pachad Yitzchak, fear, namely that he wants to get close to God, and he thinks about God, and suddenly he realizes the amazing reality and infiniteness of God. Then it falls upon a person a tremendous fear. Kasher Lavavo, when a person understands, when his heart understands that God's name is elevated, only his ray is on the world, right? You think how real we are, right? That we really exist, right? How did that French philosopher say? I am cognate, therefore I exist. I know that I'm here because I'm aware. Well, I mean, that's pretty good proof that you're here. That you're real is that you know it. You're cognate. Well, the fact of the matter is that God is infinitely more real because he's creating me and my cognition and everything all the time. But we just don't, that's too much for our mind. We can't understand it. That's fear. As soon as you realize how real God is, like the angels, it says the angels, that they're all in fear. They're all saying, holy, holy, holy. In Matan Torah, the same thing. When God gave the Torah, it says that the people, they distanced themselves. They stood away. They were shaking. Okay. Then there's the third aspect. That's Abraham. That's Yitzchak. Yitzchak is fear. Then there's Yaakov. Yaakov, he's the middle pillar. What is the middle pillar? That says Yaakov, that's mercy. And it's the aspect of Rachmanus, of mercy on someone that's far away. Love means you want to come close to something. Fear means it's too much, you can't keep away. This aspect of mercy, that's balance. You feel God's mercy, and also you have mercy on others. That's balance between an over amount of love and an over amount of fear. So these three emotions, that corresponds to the Vav. They're the source of what's called the 6 emotions of God, the letter Vav of God's name. When it comes down to, then it comes down to action. At Sof of Maisa, that's the 3 levels. That's what's called Torah and Avoda and Gemilat Chasadim. That's going to be the letter Hey. I just want to find that because this is a bit long. Yes, I'm sorry. Let's continue. Okay, these 3 pillars, as they come out into action, that's the letter Hey. But as they are in their source, in the letter Vav, this is called Torah, Avoda, prayer, and Gemilat Chasadim. Gemilat Chasadim, that's kindness. Gemilat Chasadim means charity, giving to others. That's the right arm. That's like Abraham. Avoda, that's like prayer. That's like the sacrifices, fire. That's Yitzchak. And Torah is the middle pillar. That's like Yaakov. These are the 3 sources. That's called the right, left, and the middle pillar. This is still the letter Vav of God's name. But then there's the main thing of prayer, which we said is the left arm, but that comes to be expressed into action. That's going to be the letter Hey. The letter Hey is serving God not from love, not from fear, not from Torah. This is a different attitude. This is what's called Kabbalat Ol, the accepting of the yoke of God. In other words, everything you do, everything you say, everything you feel, and all of your emotions, you do it because God wants it. That's what's called God's kingship. Like it says, Sum tasim alecha melech. Put on yourself a king. This idea of accepting the yoke of the kingship of heaven, hainu hamshachas malchuso, namely drawing down God's kingship below into the physical world, this is, like it says, after you accept Kabbalat Malchut Shemaim, you accept the kingship of heaven and Kriya Shema, it says you should have love. But after that, it says the second chapter of Shema, it says, V'im Shamoah Tishmo. It says you have to listen to what God says and do what God says unconditionally. That's the second chapter of Shema. Just that in the beginning, B'tchila nimshach mizeh ahava, you have love of God, you want to cling to God. Afterwards, when you want to think about God and you realize how great God is, then there's fear. Like it says, Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. Love gives birth to fear. What is the Torah coming to tell us? Don't we already know that Yitzchak is the son of Avram? But it's coming to tell us that Yitzchak, this thing of fear of God, this awareness of the greatness of God, this is born from love. She'ein midas Yitzchak, which is fear on its own. Or midas Avram b'fnei atzmo, it can't be on its own. But all of them in holiness, they're one unit. And there's no separation whatsoever. So this is the letter Vav. This is all the letter Vav of God's name. The Kain be'inyan akarbanos, also in the sacrifices. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, like we said, in the sacrifices, it said there was a fire that came down from heaven that ate the sacrifices. This is the face of the lion, which is on the right side. So there's a combination. What's the Rebbe saying? There can't be serving God with just one way. It has to be all linked together. And you have to appreciate God, that's love. Then you realize how infinitely great God is. From us, that's fear. And then that comes to realizing how great is God's mercy on us. That's already mercy. All of these three services have to be all linked together. What's the Rebbe doing this for? We said that God's name is not complete until Amelek is destroyed. What does it mean, God's name? So he wants to explain God's name inside of us. Is the first two letters are Yud, Hey, and the second two letters are Vav, Hey. Vav, Hey is the emotions and action. And Yud, Hey is going to be intellect, ideas. Okay, all of these six emotions, and this is the Vav of God's name. What about the Hey of God's name? We hinted at it before. Hine, behold, Tumurat Vitsurat Hey. How was the Hey? Hey has three sticks. Gimel Kavim, three sticks. Two of them are joined, that the top one and the one on the right, on our right. Shem Bechinas, this corresponds to the three garments of the soul: thought, speech, and action. The top stick of the word of the letter Hey is thought. The right stick is speech, and the third stick that's separated, that's action. Like it is written, Afasitiv, I also did. What does it mean? That we have to draw down this Vav to the letter Hey. What does it mean? A lot of times a person can get very emotional, excited about God, about his Torah, about the commandments, about Judaism, but he doesn't do anything. The Vav is the emotions. The letter Hey is actually bringing it into reality. Shuliot malbushim, melubashim, that your emotions should be clothed in thought, speech, and action. Shumaloyim mimidos kedusha, they should be filled with holiness. All right, let's see if I can. Okay. So the letter Hey, this letter Hey, which we said is thought, speech, and action of Torah and commandments and love and fear of God. There's ways this letter Hey is tremendously significant. It says that the letter Hey is the word of God, the mouth of God. Vav are the emotions. So letter Hey is the thought, speech, and action of God. In other words, the creative force that creates the world. So this letter Hey is tremendously real, much more real than the world is. And this letter, the letter Hey, can be written like it's pronounced. If you write it phonetically, the letter Hey, it can be written Hey Aleph, Hey Yud, Hey, Hey, Hey. Then you can fill it up with letter Hey, another Hey. This is what's inside of the first Hey. This is thought. Ki kamoshi ish Hey motzas b'dibur, just like there are 5 organs of speech. What's the 5 organs of speech? Without them, you can't speak properly. Your tongue, your lips, the palate, the throat, the teeth. It says there's some letters you can only say if you have teeth, right? Some letters only if you have lips, pit, pit. Some letters only from the throat. And so it says that's the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. They can be divided up according to these 5 organs of speech. Also, the same thing is in thought, just like they are in speech, so they are also in thought. The what a person thinks, that's what he speaks. There's also a hay, that's hay full of another hay. Also, there's hay full of another, you can write it hay aleph. This is the concealed, this is very concealed. This is the level of aleph, because the letter aleph also is pella. But okay, that's, so what have we discussed now? We've discussed the emotions of God, that comes down to the emotions inside of us. The action of God, speech and thought, that comes down to our action, speech and thought. But what's the source of all this? The source of this vav hey, God's emotions and action, speech and thought, and our emotions. This comes from the yud hey, the yud hey of God's name. What is this? This is the upper point. Like it says, vayetze kabarak chitzo. This is the upper flash, if we want to call it, of reality that begins all being. That's like in Reshit, the beginning of the creation of all the worlds, from nothing to something, from Ephes Muchlat, from total zero. That's this letter Yud of God's name, the beginning of creation. That's how God began to create the worlds in what's called surrounding the worlds, filling the worlds. Like it says, God created the world in one thought, created the world. 10 utterances, but one thought. That's the Yud of God's name. What's the Hey of God's name? This is how the plan of creation started to formulate. Long, wide. This is like they called the Tzimtzum, how God, so to speak, contracted himself and then started revealing himself. That's like the Yud and the Hey. The Yud is called, we talked about this before, that's like the little point in the palace. Shubichin is bittul. This is total surrender. Chuli. We talked about this before. The king has a huge palace, right? It's a mile big, but it all started off with plans. There were plans by the architect, and the plan started off with one little point, right? He put his pen on the blueprint or whatever. That first little point that he put his pen there, that's the beginning of the whole thing. That also represents the first, the same thing with God, the first little idea that God had to create the world. That's the level of Chokhmah. And when it started to come out to the plans, that's already Bina, that's Hey of God's name. Everything comes from that. All of the emotions and thought, speech and action, that's Vav Hey of God's name. This all comes from this level of the Yud and the Hey of God's name. And we can see this in ourselves. When a person thinks about God, how all the worlds and even the angels are all totally negated to God, that all of the whole entire creation is like absolutely nothing compared to God. But God could create the whole world, everything that we see, all the angels, all the stars, all these powers that all the other religions worship, all this spirituality. It's just like a little nothing to God. When we feel that, and we feel that that same God is creating me and you, he's creating me, then you see libo, then a person gets emotional, his soul and his heart become activated to God. But what if a person wants to arouse this love in his heart to God alone, in his natural emotions, then mafrid shem yurei. What if a person, instead of loving God, he wants to love music, money, possessions, success, pleasures, right? Okay, these things are not necessarily bad, but they're all certainly not good. It's in the middle. It depends on what you use it for. If that becomes your main pleasure in life, your emotions are all directed to physical things and not to God at all, then that's bad. What does that mean? That means your thoughts, that your awareness of God is separate from your emotions. your awareness of God, you can think about God, but what you get excited about is the world. That your emotions, your love, your fear, is only what I'm going to get out of it. You feel yourself. By means of this, so the physical world gets nourished from the Jews. That's Yanika Lianok, that the world can get dominance over a Jew. Because your mind, what you know is right, and what you're aware of, you don't get excited about. That's Amelek. This is egotism. This is what increases the person's egotism. Exactly the opposite of being harmonious with God. You just want to be harmonious with the world. This comes from the letters, the surrender that a Jew has to God, which that's the level of Yud-He, becomes separated from the Vav-He. That's the beginning of the 7 selfish emotions. Like it says, Ein Adam Ovor Avira, a person cannot do a sin unless there comes into him a spirit of insanity. Shu Ruach HaMechaseh Mastir, this conceals this surrender to God. Ye'ezu Chacham, who is a wise person, someone who sees the Nolad, that sees where he's born from. I mean, I'm being created now by God, and it could be that I even know it. I just finished praying, and I felt that I was created by God, and I knew it, and I was crying, and I was happy, and I was great, and I went outside, right? And I saw somebody knock into my car, or somebody that called me a name and pushed me, knocked me, and I get tremendously mad. What did I get mad about? What do you mean? The guy pushed me. He says, yeah, but I mean, if you would realize that everything comes from God, so what are you getting mad about? Do something, okay? Do something about it. He knocked your car, he made a mark. Maybe you can take him to court or something. What are you getting mad for? Why are you getting emotionally involved in the whole thing? Do what you have to do, right? The person pushed you, so he pushed you. You can say, to the person, please watch it. Please, you almost knocked me over. Maybe the person doesn't know. Maybe the person's blind. Who knows? That's a natural thing. A person, he realizes what God is, but it doesn't have any effect on his emotions. That's Amelek. Why do I get so angry? I know that getting angry is like worshiping idols, but I get angry. Why do I do it? Because I'm an egotist. That's why. And my ego kicks in automatically. And my thinking about God and my feelings about God, what separates between them? That's Amelek. That's what it means, that as long as there's Amelek selfishness, bad egotism, the name of God is not complete. What does it mean the name of God is? What I am aware of, what I believe in, does not necessarily have any effect on my emotions and my thought, speech, and action. That's Amelek. That's what it says, that God's name is not complete until Amelek is wiped out. That's what it also says, that God's throne is not complete. Kisei is case Aleph. And this is the letter of Aleph Chacham, the Torah. I will teach you wisdom. I will teach you understanding. That's the Aleph. Case means to cover over the Torah. Sometimes the Torah can be enclosed and covered over in physical things. Like, for instance, all of the matters that the Torah discusses, that's called kisei. On one hand, the Torah can be kisei, a throne for God. On the other hand, there can be a covering over the Torah. Case Aleph, there can be a covering over the Torah. This is also what Amelek does. A person can learn Torah by Amelek. Amelek, a person can learn the Torah, he can get the wisdom of God, the kisei of God, But he doesn't learn Torah for the sake of God. He doesn't learn Torah and being aware that the Torah comes from God. But what? He learns the Torah because it's so amazing. The Torah increases his wisdom, his stature, his superiority. That's called the throne of God is not complete. Amelek does that also. Amelek is egotism. So Amelek, on one hand, that's inside of each one of us. It's what separates between our awareness of God and our emotions of God. And it's also separates between the godlinesses in the Torah and the Torah. That's the kisei, covering over the aleph, the oneness of God, which is in the Torah. That's what Amelek does. And it's everywhere. And it's tremendously positive. And it's tremendously powerful, tremendously negative. But this is what's ruling the world. The people get excited about the world. And those people who do learn the Torah, there's a very, very great propensity to learn the Torah for yourself. You learn the Torah, I'll have a better family, I'll go to the world to come. Egotism rules. What's the solution? Says the hand is on the case Yud-K. What is this going to be? We're going to find out, God willing, tomorrow. Be with us. Now we're going to learn a Sikha of the Rebbe.